It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. An attack highly likely. The UK's terror threat is raised to severe following the stabbing in Golders Green. Tonight, I speak to the volunteer who helped tackle the suspect to the ground after he raised his family's fears directly with the Prime Minister today.
He's really good enough to make a change. Because otherwise, he just, what's the point? Putting my life at risk over here to protect people, and I'm not being protected.
Also tonight, the government confirms it will introduce social media restrictions for under 16s. I've been speaking to campaigners Ellen Room and Lauren Cowell about the urgent need to keep children safe online, with evidence suggesting social media companies know how harmful it is for kids, but target them anyway. All that to come, and much more on the UK Tonight. After yesterday's attack on 2 Jews in Golders Green, the UK terror threat level has been raised from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely within the next 6 months. Earlier, I went to the area where the terror incident happened, and what I found was a community determined to continue with day-to-day life, but also people really concerned about their safety. Yesterday, we brought you this video of the suspect being apprehended by police. But some of the first people on the scene were members of the Jewish volunteer security group, Shomrim. One of those, Jonathan El-Kubi, a husband and a father, who volunteers to protect his community, was amongst them. He described what happened yesterday during the attack and what he said to the Prime Minister when he met him today.
So we'll basically stand by the corner of the street, and that's really where everything happened, was right over here. Okay. So
it feels surreal that everything has gone back to normal.
I'm looking at the place.
Today.
It's, you can see, it's a busy road.
Yeah.
I'm like repicturing what's actually had happened yesterday. So right now we're actually standing where I really was involved myself. So I'm coming down from Hendon, Peterborough Street. We got the red lights. I'm standing. I'm happy to be the first car by the red light. As I'm there, I see a police car turning into Golders Green Road, turning up here, and I notice around this point they're making a U-turn. I made this judgment that the suspect must be around here if they're making a U-turn. And as that's happening, they're making a U-turn. This light becomes green. I cross over, and as I'm driving,
are you in a car or on foot?
I'm in a car. Yeah, I'm in my car. As I'm coming up, I see the suspect right in front of me with a knife. So the knife is very clearly visible. I see it, so I know who I'm now looking out for. Right over here, there's a crossing,
pedestrian crossing just there.
And just before that point, I see he's moving that direction. So I basically used my car to block off that side, and I'm like, wait, luckily there was no cars over here. Yeah. I literally blocked out, so he moved back, coming back toward the police themselves. Up, obviously, I got out of the car, I managed to get my jacket on, and assisted the police with tackling him down.
Well, jacket, is this a protective jacket or?
It's a normal jacket, just a normal jacket. Shomrim on it, it's just, you could see that.
So you can tell you're a volunteer and you're there to deal with it, you're not just a general member of the public,
What happened was, obviously, he was coming back waving his knife around here, and that's what most people can see. I was standing right at this point, and I have an eye contact with him, and I see then he's coming toward me with a knife. At that moment I felt, I've got to move back, and that's one you probably see on some of the videos. You'll see us moving forward and backward a little bit, and that's really at one point it's going out of me, at one point it's going toward the police officers. There was another 2 people out here that were also helping, very helpful. That they also, like, the person was actually going toward them as well with a knife, and it's kind of the thing. There's 2 things that came to my mind first. First of all is make sure the public is safe. I'm here to protect the people, make sure nobody gets hurt, and the second thing is making sure that he's unable to do anything. Obviously, someone's holding a knife trying to take him down with the police. Remember, I don't have any weapons on me.
What's going through your mind?
I mean, at that moment, all I know is I'm here to protect the public, and I'm here to make sure that he's unable to do anything. And what's really shocked me the most is when I saw the police officers using the taser on him, and he wasn't reacting, he was just continuing to walk. And even there, eventually they sprayed something on his face, and he's still walking. I'm looking, that moment I'm looking, and I'm like, what can I do?
Yeah,
I've got nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do myself but just use my body over here to protect what's, the people out here. Eventually he did collapse. He did still have his knife in his hand. Yeah. And
you can see the police trying to
get
contain him and get it off him.
But what's interesting is that I didn't realise they had taken the knife out of his hands.
Yeah.
So when I came around, I was mostly holding in, his lower body part, by the legs, and literally on him with the police. I thought he still had his knife in his hand. And you're just unsure. You don't know what's happening exactly.
It's all happening so fast.
It happens so fast. You just don't know what. The funny thing is, I wasn't actually thinking about my safety. I was thinking like, am I going to be able to stop this guy from doing anything? And obviously, it wasn't easy to deal with him because he was quite a built. And managed to help the police with his hand. And let's see again, these are things I noticed later on. Some of which I saw myself, that. They're trying to put his handcuff on him. It was hard. You're trying to move his hands are under his belly. You don't know what he's got in his backpack. You're just really trying to do everything you can to get the guy under control, that he's unable to do any harm. This is going off.
I should just ask everything okay there, given the events. I imagine everyone's on high alert.
Yeah, the market is everything. These are another call. Someone's looking suspicious. People are worried. They're calling us, so they're sending out some members to go and check out to make sure the person's all right.
And this is daily.
This is all the time we get that. It could be during the day, during the night.
Jonathan, the Prime Minister was here just a couple of hours ago and he was booed as he arrived. And he came in to speak to those involved in what happened here yesterday, and somebody pointed you out as someone who helped to stop everything.
I was there.
You really wanted to say something to the Prime Minister.
So and I did manage to get one point across to him, especially it's a personal point. Like I mentioned to him, the event happened, but later on in the evening when I got home, my wife said she might want to leave England. And one of the points I made across to him is explain to him that most of my wife's family lives abroad, and she's here for me. I need to know that if I'm staying here with my family, I'm protected and I'm safe. I said to him, my wife, the first reaction was, I think we should pack our bags and go. I said to him, what am I going to tell my wife to convince her to say, no, you're not, you are safe over here?
And what did he say?
He took the point and said, we're taking it on board. He said that he obviously wished his best to my wife and explained to her that he'll do everything he can to make sure our community is protected. But I did explain to him that I could go tomorrow abroad, live closer to my wife's family.
And these are conversations being had in homes all around here by
members. It is. People talk about it. I hear there's people saying maybe we should go, maybe we should go. People in Israel are going to feel safe. I'll be honest, Israel is a homeland. I feel safe when I'm there. I'm not over worried when I'm there. I'm feeling today a lot more worried over here who's walking behind my back versus when I walk over there.
Do you feel like the Prime Minister will do something about it? Because there are a lot of words. Do you really want to see action now? I
really want to see an action, especially I put my life here.
Do you feel confident that you'll see action from the Prime Minister after meeting him today?
I really, really hope. Can I trust him? I hope so. He's really good enough to make a change, because otherwise, what's the point? Putting my life at risk over here to protect people, and I'm not being protected.
Well, in the studio with me now, our home editor, Jason Farrell. And Jason, you've been in Golders Green today talking to members of the community, and it was really interesting that the end of my conversation there with Jonathan, he spoke directly to the Prime Minister today and told him exactly what his family's fears are, and their fears echoed amongst the Golders Green community and other Jewish communities across the UK. Are we safe here? Do we have to leave? Like, you were there. You were there when
I was listening in on his conversation with the Prime Minister,
and the Prime Minister didn't get a good reaction in Golders Green today. He was booed.
So he was in a compound, and they didn't want anyone really to know that they were coming, so that he could get in and out. And obviously the media were informed. Somehow crowds of people found out about it and turned up. But when he was in there, a camera goes in and a journalist, and I was that journalist, just listening, just to be able to kind of report back on the mood and the atmosphere. And people like Jonathan were talking to him and saying those kind of things. And also I was talking to them afterwards, asking what they'd said. And there were similar stories. One of the people I spoke to said that his daughter was currently at Bristol University, but as soon as she left the university, she was going to go to Israel. And that there were families who were finding other family members were leaving, and they were considering leaving. And the mood was, thanks very much for the extra security. And some of them were apologising for the mood and the atmosphere outside. You know, we're thankful that you've come here, but actually we need, you want the government to get the tone right. We want to hear the right words from you. And then later in the day, we did get the Prime Minister in Downing Street saying things that I think were quite significant. Just this thing he said here, of course we protect freedom of speech and peaceful protest in this country, but if you're marching with people wearing pictures of paragliders without calling it out, you're venerating the murder of Jews. It's talking about the people marching with those people. I thought that was really interesting because those were the kind of comments he was getting in that compound. Why are you letting these marches happen? That was a lot of the comments. And then he adds, if you stand alongside people who say globalise the Intifada, you're calling for terrorism against Jews. And people who use that phrase should be prosecuted. And this was some of the strongest language yet that we've had from the Prime Minister. So just going back earlier in the day, also I spoke to one of the victims who was the first victim in the attacks yesterday. This is my report.
This fellow came towards me, running towards me, and he just stabbed me in my chest.
I'm talking to Shlomi Rand. In this video, the attacker circled in red is running towards him. When they come together behind the tree, he's stabbed and runs for his life. He's now recovering in hospital with an injury to the lung.
I didn't see his knife. I didn't know at the moment that I was stabbed. I just ran. I saw that he was chasing me, and I ran to a nearby synagogue to take shelter. That way I noticed that I'm bleeding.
What would you say to the Prime Minister?
What I'd say to the Prime Minister, I'd say that it's time to stop to ignore what's happening in the streets of London and take charge.
And what do you think he needs to do?
First of all, then change the tone, the way he speaks about our people.
Hatzola, the Jewish volunteer ambulance service in Golders Green, is where the Prime Minister chose to meet members of the community.
Well, the Prime Minister is due to be here in about 20 minutes, but his visit was supposed to be kept under wraps, and it appears that word has got out because now there's a growing group of people here who are not big fans of the Prime Minister.
Don't want more funding for security. We want the threats to stop.
This cannot happen again. It's not too much. Never again should people be getting stabbed on these streets.
I'm angry, very angry, but also quite afraid for the future.
Inside the compound of this Jewish community ambulance service, the Prime Minister met first responders who'd helped the victims and some who'd even administered aid to the perpetrator after he'd been tasered and forcibly detained.
Well, it was interesting earwigging on some of the conversations in here because whilst the medics and first responders here were welcoming Keir Starmer when he arrived, they were also asking him questions about what his government was going to do, particularly around what they were describing as anti-Jewish marches in the centre of London. And Keir Starmer responded saying that that was something his government had been talking about this morning.
Afterwards, the Prime Minister had this message.
We will strengthen our security and protect our Jewish community. But I also call on everyone decent in this country to open their eyes to Jewish pain, Jewish suffering, and Jewish fear. I call on everyone to come together and fight anti-Semitism.
The suspect has been named as 45-year-old Essa Suleiman. Police said on Thursday he'd been referred to de-radicalisation programme Prevent in 2020. CCTV obtained by Sky News shows people running away after the first victim was stabbed, and we see the suspect walking across the road towards his next victim, a 76-year-old man standing at a bus stop. After being tasered by the police, the suspect was held to the ground. Civilians tried to help disarm him.
Drop the knife!
A volunteer who patrols the area pinned his legs down.
No matter what comes our way, whether hate or danger, we'll always run towards that danger and protect them.
The government's now raised the terror threat level from substantial to severe, meaning another terrorist attack in the next 6 months is highly likely. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Well, Jason, let's talk about the Jewish community. We were both in Golders Green today, and I found it remarkable how it was business as usual. You wouldn't have known a terror incident took place on those streets. Jews getting their lunch, picking their kids up from school. But that is a community that is described as strong and resilient because they've been living under this threat for months, years. It's been increasing. For them, it's not if there was an attack like this, but where and when, and it just happened to be on their doorstep in Golders Green.
I think it was deceptively normal. I think, you know, you walk onto the high street and, yeah, you're right, I felt it the same. It's like, oh, nothing's changed here.
On the surface,
it looks
everything
exactly the same. But what you have now, and the people walking around that street, is, you know, they are worried about going to a kosher restaurant. They're worried about going to a Jewish event, a ceremony, a synagogue. They're worried and thinking about toning down visible signs of their Jewishness. And if that's the situation that you've got, that is terrorism working. If you've got people who are re-evaluating their life and what defines them, that is terrorism working. So although I'm the same walking around thinking it's very similar, nothing seems to have changed, I think there has been a change. And these last few weeks, it's been growing as well. I think the other attacks and the attacks on the ambulance, it's all cumulative. And the fear is that accumulation hasn't stopped. And then we see the terror threat go up to reflect that, of course.
And the Jewish community talking about they need action, not just words. And this terror threat being raised, I'm sure the Jewish community are thinking, well, quite right, because we've been living with this fear and it's now been acknowledged by the terror threat being raised. It means that an attack is likely within the next 6 months. What happens from this point in? What does this look like, particularly for the Jewish community and their protection?
So obviously there's been this extra money that's been put forward to 25 million to help protect particularly Jewish areas. You're right, we've got this, the Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre, JTAC, has put up the terrorism threat, and that does mean that going up to severe means it is likely that there will be a terrorist attack in the next 6 months. Why do they do that? The last time they did it, it was because there had been 2 terrorist attacks in succession, the Liverpool Women's Hospital and then the murder of David Amis. And when you see a succession of attacks, that's often what precedes the terror threat going up. What actually happened after that was it came down again 3 months later because nothing had happened. That, hopefully, is what happens again. It's also based on an analysis, and I think the other thing it is based on is this increased sense that there is a threat by state actors, that there is state-sponsored terrorism proxies working for example, the Iranian state, but also the Russians we've seen. And that is also added in, I think, to this analysis. So there is this sense that the threat is high, particularly amongst the Jewish community. And I think the Jewish community want to see the kind of sounds that we were getting from Keir Starmer there, not just increased security, not just having to barricade themselves in, but a real sense that the government and, quite frankly, the British people are behind them, out in support with them, and recognise that this is a community that is under a really intolerable threat at the moment.
And the Chief Rabbi, I saw a video that he posted saying, you know, where are the silent majority? You know, Keir Starmer in his speech today saying it is an attack on them, the Jewish community, an attack on all of us. Jason, thank you very much. Jason Farrell with many interviews today down there in Golders Green telling the story of what unfolded with Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. He said yesterday that the Golders Green suspect had a history of serious violence and mental health issues. Sky News has learned that the man arrested on suspicion of attempted murder in Golders Green was jailed over the stabbing of a policeman and his dog in Swindon back in 2008. We've been hearing from former Constable Neil Sampson.
He was coming at me quicker than I could go backwards from him, so I sent the dog. And after that moment, to say all hell broke loose, it would be about right. The dog went straight into him, bounced off and disappeared out of sight, which was a bit like, oh, that's not meant to happen. And following that, she came back at him from his right-hand side. I moved forward, and I've got vague memories of what happened thereafter. I know I did at one point try to kick him. I missed, and he came back at me with a knife. Fair to say, my last real memory of the incident was feeling a banging on the back of my head, and that was, I thought I was being punched in the back of my head, but I was actually being stabbed in the back of my head at that time. It was my fear. When it was voiced, I voiced my fear that, you know, that he could reoffend, and I just hoped that if he did reoffend, that the victims were as lucky as I was. As it turns out they were. I'm sure they don't think they were lucky, because they would have, who wants to get stabbed? It's not something that anyone wants, but lucky to survive.
Well, let's get more on this story now. The independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall, joins me now. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time this evening. Your reaction to that news earlier on that the terror threat level is being raised too severe.
Well, I'm not surprised. It's definitely independent, by the way. It's not the government making the decision. They're very independent, and they'll be looking at everything. What's interesting, I think, is the reference to state threats. So there's not a separate public threat level for state threats. But what the Home Office has made pretty clear is with states getting involved, then that is going to have an effect on terrorism in the UK, because, as we know, hostile states will use terrorism as a tactic.
Jonathan, break that down for me in terms of the Home Office said that this threat level has been rising for some time, driven by an increase in broader Islamist and extreme right-wing terrorist threat from individuals and small groups based in the UK. And you talk there about state threats. How does all of that translate into what we see on the streets?
Well, we don't know about this particular case, so I won't speculate. But in the past, we've seen documented cases of Russia and Iran contacting individuals and saying, would you please do a job? Now, that job could be spraying some graffiti. It could be putting some petrol through the letterbox of a synagogue. In principle, it could be even carrying out an attack. And we know that happens because states don't have as much access to the UK as they used to have. So their intelligence officers aren't on the streets, so they can use the internet. And the internet, I'm afraid, is a perfect recruiting tactic because it's sort of easy, it's pretty, you know, you're not going to get caught, and it's pretty cheap. They can put an offer onto Telegram, which is a well-known platform for this sort of activity, offering people to do something. They might want to do something quite small to begin with, and then once they've got them doing something small, they can suggest something bigger. And then before you know it, they're carrying out something quite significant. And I think the point I would make, which I didn't really realise until I began to look at this more, you think that foreign intelligence services are real about taking secrets from governments. Actually, that's not at all true. One of the things that they do just as much is sabotage. And they do that because not only because they want to have an immediate effect, so, for example, get revenge on Jews for the killing of Soleimani or the killing of the Ayatollah, they also want to create a sense of fear. Who did it? Why is it happening to us? Is it someone else's fault within the system? And that can create a sense of division within the society. And a country, of course, like Iran doesn't like the UK generally. Russia regards the UK as a strategic enemy. So it's quite a useful tactic for foreign intelligence services. And if they can get someone to do their dirty work for them, so much the better.
Can I just ask you about something that the Home Secretary announced off the back of what happened in Golders Green? Of course, you know, calls for more security, tighter legislation, new rules coming in. The Home Secretary saying that there will be new prescription-like powers to ban the activities of state-backed organisation who pose a threat to the UK's national security. It will give police and intelligence agencies stronger tools under the National Security Act to disrupt the activities of anyone acting in this nature. Is it effective and necessary? When should terrorism legislation come to play? And do we have laws in place at the moment that could just be better utilised?
Well, for this, there's a bit of a problem, which is that we don't have terrorism laws that work against state entities. So if you take the IRGC, it's got quite a large number of people who are officers. I think the Buzzage Reserve Force of the IRGC is something like 600,000 strong. Now, it's one thing to say that if you're a member of a terrorist organisation, then you commit an offence. It's quite another thing to say that a foreign country which has got an army, if you're a member of that military force, then you're committing an offence. And so, I mean, I looked at this last year, and you know, it's all available online. I conclude, I think the government agrees, that you can't use terrorism against states, which is why you needed a really special new power to deal with the really most sort of militant and dangerous intelligence services. And I think the thing that it will also do, assuming this is what comes forward in the King's speech, it will also allow the Home Secretary to say that group, let's take a familiar example from Russia, the Wagner group, that group is effectively carrying out intelligence activities as well. And that group could also be prescribed. And then that brings in the stronger powers under the National Security Act. And just, you know, putting it in a nutshell, if I'm tempted to go and carry out a job for some person who's offering £100, I'm at risk now of committing a national security offence, which is, you know, a very serious offence with a really strong deterrent sentence if you get caught.
Jonathan, can I ask your view on anti-Israel protests? Because given what has been going on in Golders Green, given the threat level, the terror threat level has been raised, is it time to simply ban anti-Israel demonstrations at this moment in time? When I was in Golders Green today, those protests came up time and time again as a concern within the Jewish community. They're saying, look, this is the backdrop to which all of this is happening, this kind of rhetoric that's put out in these speeches. It is fueling anti-Semitism, and an open and honest discussion about that needs to be had.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. Back in the day, 2023, after the 7th of October attacks, I wrote a paper and published it, and I mean, the government accepted my view that just banning protests was not the right way to go. I have to say that in the light of the evidence now, with this sort of perpetual demonisation of not just Israel, the country, or what Israel is doing, which is completely fine to say what you like about it, but demonising of Israelis, demonising of Jews, demonising of Zionists, and it's quite personal. The view I've taken is that it sort of normalises things. You know, we talk about extremism, but we're talking really about normalising levels of hatred and slogans in the public domain. And I think the sad fact is, and I mean, I think it's worth being honest about this, all of these marches have had in them expressions of hatred. And I think the Prime Minister was right today to say, yeah, it may not be every person who's carrying something saying globalise the intifada, but the people who are standing next to them are not exactly saying stop it. So I think that a moratorium on pro-Palestine marches is the right thing to do, because otherwise there is a risk that some new individual will look at what people are saying publicly and getting away with saying publicly, and they'll go, well, I know what, I've got to do something about those people. I've got to do something about those Jews and those Zionists and those Israelis. I've got to take my own personal steps. So I agree with what they were saying on the streets of Golders Green.
Jonathan, really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much, Jonathan Hall there.
Thank you.
Still to come on the UK tonight, the Bank of England reveals what the worst-case scenario is for interest rates. Also ahead, our MI5 caught a neo-Nazi who was planning a mass gun attack. And the government is bringing in restrictions on social media for under 16s. But what are they, and will they be enough to keep children safe?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story? The Bank of England held interest rates at 3.75% today as the war in Iran continues to weigh heavy on the UK's economic outlook. It comes as oil prices spiked once again. Our business and economics correspondent Paul Kelso has more.
The Bank of England has held interest rates at 3.75%, but that might not be the good news it seems. It may just be bad news delayed as a consequence of the Iran war. Now, to work out what happens next, the bank is looking at what is perhaps the most consequential number in economics, the oil price. Here's the price going back to October, bumping along at around $70 a barrel. The war begins. We know what happens. Up goes the oil price. You're feeling this at the petrol pump. But look, the last 24 hours, it's actually hit a peak above $126 at its highest. Let's put that on a different time frame and go back 5 years. It's higher than it was after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, what happens to the oil price? The bank has said will set the path for what it has to do with interest rates. So it's set out to try and understand it better. 3 scenarios based on energy prices and draw some conclusions from that. Scenario A, this green line, the most benign picture. Oil at $110 a barrel, wishful thinking perhaps, comes down back to around $80 quite quickly and stays there. There's a second scenario, the Goldilocks scenario, a little bit higher for longer oil prices, but coming down faster. The one that's really striking is this scenario C, the worst case they set out, where oil is nearly $130 a barrel, which it got to essentially during the bank's meeting, and then it stays there for all of this year and for into the future, still much higher than it was before the war. Now, that obviously has a big impact on inflation, so they've mapped the path for inflation based on these scenarios. You'll note the blue and the green, the more mild, more benign scenarios. Under both of these, inflation climbs. We're at 3.3% at the moment. They get up to 3.6, 3.7. The really striking one, of course, is scenario C, the worst case, peaking at 6.2% and then coming down. This is a return to the kind of inflation we saw after the war in Ukraine that many households haven't recovered from. So I asked the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, how likely is this to actually happen?
We want to do everything we can to avoid this coming about. But let me give you it's important to say what's in that scenario. Because what's in that scenario is not just that we have oil and gas prices going up a lot, it's that they stay up. That scenario has the oil price staying above $100 a barrel till the end of next year, not just this year, next year. That's a very persistent, if you like, sort of shock. The best way to solve this problem is at the source of the problem, which is solving the issues in the Gulf, getting the energy supplies flowing again, and meaning that energy prices can come down.
Now, different paths for inflation mean different paths for interest rates. That's fundamentally the Bank of England's job. And they've set out 3 potential paths based on their scenarios. But you'll notice the most benign, the blue and the green, they imply at least 2 rate cuts this year, getting up to 4.25%. The scary line, the red line, that looks like 5.25%, the same as the peak from which, before now, the bank had been walking down after the Ukraine war. Now, the truth is that none of these are nailed on, and the reality will probably lie somewhere in between. But you can look at these paths for rates and deduce a couple of things. Prices are almost certainly going to rise. Rates are likely to follow on whatever the Bank of England does and whatever Rachel Reeves chooses to do. Perhaps the most important decisions for British households will depend on what happens in the Strait of Hormuz.
Says come here on the UK Tonight. I'll hear from campaigners Ellen Room and Lauren Cowell about the need to keep children safe online. This is as the government says they will bring in restrictions for under 16s.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again.
How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armour on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They will be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armour on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Next tonight, to an issue that we've covered a lot here on the programme, how to keep children safe online. Well, there's a public consultation currently underway. However, ahead of its conclusion, the government said that they will introduce restrictions in some form on social media for under 16s. It's not clear what those limits will look like just yet because the consultation is ongoing. But Downing Street says it will continue to speak to families and campaigners on what the restrictions should include. Well, one of those who has been tirelessly campaigning to raise the minimum age for social media is Ellen Room. Ellen's 14-year-old son, Jules, died in 2022, and Ellen strongly believes that he died after an online challenge went wrong. Earlier today, I spoke to Ellen alongside Lauren Cowell, who's been supporting her with her campaign. And I started by asking them for their reaction to the news this week that the government does plan to bring in restrictions on social media for children, a huge step forward.
I'd woken up that morning thinking there's no way we're going to have this happen, they just can't be bothered to do it. And then when it actually happened, it was about 11:15 at night and my phone just started going mental. I was like, really, what, is this actually happening? So yeah, I'm so delighted that they're actually, saying they will do something. Yeah, we're crying out for it. Everybody across the UK is crying out for it.
Lauren, I'll come to you on this. What restrictions do you want to see come in? Because there are a range on the table. What do you think will really work?
Well, for me, I think initially we had all agreed and we were all aligned on the fact that we thought that a kind of like a total ban, we never really like to use the word ban, but essentially what we were asking for was just a raise the age to 16 for social media. What I think we really are asking for right now is to remove the harmful features from all of the platforms. So the harmful features being, or the most harmful features being the live location, the algorithms where the harmful content is sent and exposed to our children. And what was the other one we were talking about?
So whereby stranger pairing children can talk to strangers on their platforms.
Yeah.
I also think live location needs to be switched off.
I started to do my own research about all of these things because something in my gut instinctively as a mom, I guess, was saying this doesn't feel right. And so I started to delve into it more because I never had Instagram until December, since we did a documentary, and I didn't have Instagram until we did that show. So for me, it was also very new. So when I started to do my research, I very quickly realized that this is very, very bad what's going on. And in all the research I was doing, it led me to Ellen and Ellen's story about Jules, her son, who tragically passed away 4 years ago. And I just, when I heard the story about Jules and Ellen, I just couldn't step away from it. It was something that I couldn't stop thinking about. I contacted Ellen. I asked her at first, how could I help? You know, I want to meet you, I want to help.
And also, do you feel a sense of responsibility? Because Ellen, you know, at the time, you weren't aware of how bad social media was. Jules was just, you know, ordinary boy on social media, as all his friends were. But now it almost feels like those parents that haven't lost a child have that responsibility of you have the knowledge, you know how bad it can get. It's now is the time to act.
Well, we never talked about it. Back when I gave Jules a phone, we all talked about it as parents going, is this the right age? And everybody went to secondary school and we all said, OK, that's the age they get the smartphone. And we didn't know about the harms of social media. I honestly thought it was stupid dances on TikTok and, you know, silly chat features and you can make your face look like a cat and, you know, I just thought it was fun. And we didn't know about it. And after Jules died, I always said if I can use Jules' story to save one other life, and that's what I wanted to do.
For so many parents, it is pressure from the children and their children's wider circle. How do you talk about it with Eric? Because he's 12,
He's
so
12.
again, as you said, all his friends will be getting it, and it's quite hard to put some of the awful things that go on social media in language and in conversation for younger children, for them to get it. They're too young to get it, which is why they're so vulnerable on social media. So how do you talk about it as part of your family?
I think that's such a good question, SJ. And the truth is, we're just learning this all as we go along. Until we can make sure that these platforms are safe, they cannot be on them. They can't, because too many things can go wrong here. And obviously, you know, losing a child is at the very, very extreme end of this. But it's all the stuff that happens in between. It's the bullying, it's the sextortion, it's the grooming, it's the
eating disorders.
The eating disorders, you know, the content that they're being exposed to. It's not healthy. It's just not.
You've had a busy couple of weeks, Ellen, because in a landmark case, you're now a significant step closer to a new inquest into Jules' death, which is something you've been fighting for a long time. It comes with no opposition from the coroner or the social media platform TikTok to your High Court application for this, because you want crucial social media and digital evidence to be properly examined, because it wasn't during the original inquest. And in the time that has lapsed since that original inquest, we know so much more now about social media and its harms. This is vital. And again, this could be hugely significant for your campaigning in this space. How are you feeling about this step forward?
Well, I'm the first British parent to ever do this. So right from the word go, I said, we've missed something about what happened to Jules. We've missed it. And the only thing that wasn't looked at was his social media data. And then when I went to the social media companies and they wouldn't give it to me, and I then thought, as a parent, you're not legally entitled to see it. And it's like, what? He's my child.
Because the suspicion always was that Jules was potentially looking at a TikTok challenge. And we've heard so much about those in the news, the viral challenge trends, which can be harmful for children, physically harmful.
Well, I raised that at the very beginning when they were first investigating it, because Archie Battersby had his accident 6 days before Jules, and it was all over the news, and everybody kept saying, do you think it could be the same thing? And I said to the officers then, could it be this? And they said, maybe, but we can't prove it. And when you've lost a child, I was barely functioning. I was literally crawling up the stairs on my hands and knees, and I didn't have the strength. And then you're trying to get back into going to work again and trying to get your head into that, and I just couldn't do it. And so it took me 2 years before I was ready to say, now I'm going to look for answers, which is when I then started campaigning for Jules Law, which is now becoming law. So that will be, it's going through the Crime and Policing Bill, or the Police and Crime Bill, whichever way around it is. And when that becomes law, within 5 days of a child dying, their data will automatically be preserved. So you will never have another parent in my position begging for that data.
It's just crazy that it's not already the case. And again, that's something that we would never even know about. So, I mean, the fact that she's doing this now is, you know, it's so important.
And this is vital because it will make the case stronger by what is now on public record in the United States, bereaved parents in the US taking on social media firms in US courts. And a lot of what has been put on public record after being revealed in the courts, you feel hasn't filtered through to the general public, particularly here in the UK. And it's worth going through some of it because it's shocking what was admitted to by social media companies behind closed doors. The stories they were presenting publicly to the general public the governments and regulators was completely different. What were some of the most shocking things you found in the evidence that came out in the US courts?
For me, there's one with Instagram where it says one member of staff says there's 500,000 victims a week on their platform, and another member of staff comes in and says it's not a week, it's 500,000 victims per day which are being fed harmful content. If you average that or multiply that up for a year, that's 182.5 million children are being affected just on one platform with with harmful criteria that's being fed to them.
And what about predators accessing them? Wasn't there another statistic about that as well, which was just, again, shocking?
That they know there's groomers on their platform.
So there's a wide range of social media companies, their internal communications brought out in court, saying they know. All of this is now on public record. What do you want to say to parents watching this interview this evening?
Don't be naive. Don't be naive to think, oh, it can't be that bad, or I've got my parental controls on. That's one of them,
They don't work.
It says that they know that the parental controls don't work.
They don't
so
work.
all they know is that the kids are switching it off, and there's a way of switching it off, and the kids can do it.
Well, Ellen and Lauren, thank you so much. Like I said, it's been a hugely significant week for this campaign in keeping children safe online, and we will talk again with the next development. I was going to say, we are not done yet, and we will talk again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Ellen Broom and Lauren Cowell talking to me earlier on today. In other news, a neo-Nazi has been found guilty of planning a mass gun attack after being caught in an MI5 undercover sting. Alfie Coleman had drawn up a so-called kill list of customers and colleagues at the Tesco where he worked before he was arrested in September 2023. Sky's Molly Malone has the story.
A teenager intent on terror. Alfie Coleman was 19 when he was arrested in a supermarket car park as part of an undercover operation. He'd just been filmed picking up a deactivated gun from the boot of a car and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, which he'd saved thousands of pounds for from earnings at his part-time job at Tesco. The court heard how he'd branded staff their race traitors for having partners who weren't white, compiling a kill list of former colleagues and customers. He was, said prosecutors, a white supremacist neo-Nazi who believed in extreme right-wing thoughts, idolising Adolf Hitler, and also the man who murdered MP Joe Cox.
Alfie Coleman was planning to carry out a mass casualty attack. He'd been self-radicalised from the age of 14, but in summer 2023 we started to see his behaviour change, and he was actively seeking to purchase firearms.
Investigators said Coleman was brought up in what they described as a normal family with a normal education. But having spent considerable time behind closed doors during COVID, pictures from his bedroom show signs of radicalisation.
We are seeing in our casework younger and younger people that are online, that are being exposed to terrorism-related material and either radicalising, self-radicalising, or being influenced by others.
Coleman had admitted trying to obtain a firearm as well as having terrorist material. The makings of a petrol bomb were found in his bedroom, but he denied preparing an attack. His interest in extreme ideology would continue from Coleman's prison cell. He drew weapons and Nazi symbols in notes written while he was inside. He wrote that he remains steadfast to secure the existence of my people and a future for white children, and said, "Long live the Aryan race." Police say it's not clear who Alfie Coleman intended on attacking. He'd researched mosques in France, written about hijacking a plane, and had a kill list for what he thought were traitors working at Tesco. There had been no prior police contact or interaction with the de-radicalisation programme Prevent, nor were his parents said to have had knowledge of his mindset. He was a lone operator, intent on harm. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Still to come on the programme, what next for golf's controversial breakaway Live Golf Tour? This is after Saudi Arabia withdraw funding for it.
With respect, Minister, answer the question. It's you.
Hello.
Hello and welcome, I'm Kathy Newman. So could the outcome of these elections be manipulated? New me, new show, new furniture. Hard news needs a hard chair. I feel like I'm in therapy. Oh, there's room for two on this one. Do you think people will take me seriously with my feet up?
Sorry, madam, but we're closing now.
Oh, sorry. Sofa sorted, let's get this show on the road.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Durman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Right, we're going to talk about sport now. Live Golf, you'll remember, created just 5 years ago, and there were fears that it could be the end of the sport as we know it. However, to date, Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund have withdrawn their funding from the competition. To discuss this and take a look at the rest of today's sport is Jess. And Jess, this is really interesting. So the Saudis pulling the money out of this tournament. The big question is, does live on without their cash?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, their future at the moment is in serious doubt. I mean, over the last 5 years, there's been about just under £4 billion in investment in that time. And it's come, as you rightly say, from the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, or PIF, as they're known. And 5 years later now, if they decide to pool their money because they've decided that they want to look at different things strategically and invest in different things strategically, it could mean the end of this competition. Look, they've never really made a real profit either, and they want to focus elsewhere. Boxing, for example. Anthony Joshua will be fighting in Saudi Arabia soon. Newcastle, football, they own that Premier League club as well. So they do have other distractions to pull them away from this.
And who comes in to buoy up that tournament? Because, like you said, it's never made a profit. In fact, it lost more than £1 billion in 5 years. We're talking big money here, the likes of which only the Saudis probably have. So what does this mean for, like, some of the big names, the big-name golfers who took a huge risk to join the tour, because it was controversial because of the Saudis' involvement? What does it mean for some of those big names, do you think?
Yeah, that's a big question now, because there were some big names. Bryson DeChambeau, Tyrrell Hatton, John Rahm, Phil Mickelson, they all moved over to the LIV Tour quite controversially. And now they will have to worry about their futures, because without the funding, what will the competition look like going forward? Interestingly, the PGA Tour did offer them a chance to actually make a return this February. Only one of them took up that offer. That was Brooks Koepka, and it cost him £63 million in unpaid fees and fines. So you do wonder about the strained relationship between the golfers and the PGA Tour, whether they'll be able to make a return, but some big decisions to be made by some of the best golfers in the world.
pay.
In 2020, Jude Bellingham's move to Borussia Dortmund caught the eye. £25 million for a player who'd only ever played in the Championship. But there's now a wider trend of players outside the Premier League getting moves to Europe's top 4 divisions. So what's behind that?
We look at Championship, we look at League One, we look at League Two. So it's a market we look at a lot, but we are being very realistic at the same time. If you are looking to play very good football, great atmosphere into the stadium, in a very competitive league, and maybe look, to make a step further somewhere when you leave Toulouse, and then a low money, then you should consider us.
Different type of football out here. It's like in England, it's very intense and physical, and I feel like here, it's tactically, they've more focus on the tactics and the technical side of things, so you have to be more composed on the ball and figure out patterns of play, and it's good for my football brain.
Not many players get the chance to go from League One to the Bundesliga, so I thought take that jump abroad and see how things go.
When I came,
Quick look at the weather before we go.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Tomorrow will bring more warm sunshine, but there will be some showers around, some of them thundery. The bank holiday weekend is going to be cooler and more unsettled. Most places looking fine this evening. Northern Ireland and the far southwest of Britain seeing showery outbreaks.